Hello and welcome to episode 243 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week is our special Year in Review episode where we will casually have a conversation about the good and a little bit of the bad. Because the bad, Brian, you can't handle the bad. You've cut yourself off from the news. You don't even know that Uzbekistan has been nuked into oblivion. You know very little.
Very little.
The moon left the orbit.
Oh, well, better. I'm happier not to know, frankly.
Don't look up. Don't look up, Brian.
And, normally we do hundreds of hours of research before every episode.
At least hundreds.
But, we're sort of more casual and winging it a bit this week.
Yes, and it is very easy for me to do this as a full-time job if it was worth my while. And because I have spent probably 60 hours some weeks on it, a lot of it is cutting up video and promoting the show so that the only way the show can grow rapidly is that way. So yeah, that and advertising, I suppose. But here we are at the end of the year, and in many ways it was a good year. We're almost halfway through our run here because we promised to go to 2030 because we didn't think we'd need it after that. I hope we're right about that.
No, this is crazy. Yeah, we're almost halfway. That was always the plan, to go to 2030. So,
and it's unbelievable that we're halfway. But we started just before the pandemic, and the pandemic probably kept us going through low ratings, and just gave us something to do every week. And then the show eventually started to grow, and that was nice. And now we've got lots of people listening to us and giving us feedback, which we love. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com anytime. But yeah, there was one big negative. Maybe we should get it out of the way, and that was the United States election, because that is not good for climate. Because the United States, with the Inflation Reduction Act, which a lot of people, the climate wasn't even mentioned during the campaign, but the Inflation Reduction Act was the largest climate legislation in the world's history. Like, it was, financially, it was huge, and it made the U.S. a player. It tried to do some pretty big things, like bringing solar manufacturing to the United States, where China is doing almost all the solar manufacturing, and they're doing it so well that their companies are barely in business. It's cutthroat, but they're going to put tariffs on Chinese, clean energy products and try to make their own. And that's okay. I don't know what's going to happen now. A lot of that is in red jurisdictions. Somebody said recently, don't call it red states, call it red jurisdictions, because they are very much, Tennessee, for example, has Nashville, but a lot of Nashville votes Democrat.
Yeah.
But a lot of these battery factories are in rural areas, or car manufacturing plants are in rural areas, and they are very much in red districts. So will there be a political appetite to cut that off? We'll see. And then, of course, Elon Musk, whatever's left of him, seems to be in the government, and what kind of an influence will he have? Does he care anymore? I'm starting to wonder if he's even on his mind anymore, because he did say we need more fossil fuels recently. I don't think we do. I think the world needs to stop warming, Brian. It really needs to stop warming fast.
Yeah, well, on the topic of bad news, is this official? But the world seems to have hit 1.5 degrees Celsius warming this year.
The way to look at it is, it's going to hit 1.5, but it may not permanently be the 1.5. But right now we're 1.5 because it was a particularly hot year. Hopefully next year, the year after, because of the currents, ocean currents, that have made it particularly hot. Yeah, that's what I've read from climate scientists. Yeah. So I don't pretend to understand how one current can warm the whole planet, but it can certainly raise temperatures on land, I guess.
Yeah, and we do know that every year has been getting hotter, and of course, we want to stop this. So this is 1.5 degrees Celsius above the norm, or above pre-industrial levels. And so, we're headed towards 2 degrees, possibly higher, but, and things like the U.S. election. So why, James, do I remain optimistic? I'm still optimistic about all this stuff, but perhaps
because of the economics. I think the economics of everything seems to be overpowering political ill will.
Yeah. So I'm trying to just stay focused on clean energy and not necessarily just American politics. Like we were texting earlier this week about what's going on with U.S.-Canada relations. And I don't even want to talk about it because it's just stupid bluster. It's political bluster that doesn't have anything to do with legislation or reality. And we're unfortunately in for 4 more years of political bluster. And I'm going to try my best to ignore that and just read the news. Stick with the news.
Okay. Good luck. And I envy you. And I've tuned out a lot of stuff too, but I don't know. So we're recording this in advance. Okay. This is so we can take some of the holidays off. So we're recording in advance to still put out a show. And our next show will probably be around, I think, the 9th of January or something. Let me look at my calendar. Yes, it looks like the 8th or 9th of January will be our next show. Maybe we'll do a bonus show before that for our Patreon and Apple subscribers just to get that out of the way. But yeah, so we're going to be off for just a bit here, and we're putting this out in the middle of that period and recording in advance. I was just out snowblowing.
Yeah, the snow clearing in our city is absolutely terrible, and I'm sure it could somehow be better. You know what I was noticing this time at the last big snowfall? All the parking lots for like the businesses, they're all cleared immediately. Like after a snowstorm, you drive past and all these businesses have nicely cleared parking lots. And I just think, well, why can't they hire those people when they're finished the parking lot to just like do the street around them? It's crazy and super annoying.
I'm used to getting somebody else's packages all the time. I get somebody else's packages that it's like a similar number, but my Amazon guy is dyslexic or something. So yeah, I had all these packages to give this feeble old woman and she could barely carry them, but I was snowblowing. And the thing that struck me, she says, I'm really good friends with your neighbor, Bonnie. And that's my next door neighbor who I don't know terribly well. She lost her husband a couple of years ago. And all these people are all best friends around here who built these houses in 1979, 80, where this subdivision is. And they all just became, because that's the way it was back then. That's the way it was in my neighborhood too. I don't know about you when you grew up, but we would all get together Christmas time, like there would be a Christmas breakfast across the street. And we didn't have relatives. I still don't have relatives. That's why I had 2 kids, so I could have relatives. So we didn't have, big family gatherings. So that was our family gathering, was our neighbors. And, after a while, when cable TV came around and video games and air conditioning, where, you didn't sit outside on hot nights and drink rum and rye and whatever they drank. Yeah, but they don't around here. They used to all vacation together every year, like 5 vacations a year. They would go to the lake and share their boats and just be totally close to each other. So it's just not like that anymore. It's just not like that anymore.
No, that was very much like the street that I grew up on. And it's like everybody had kids who were a similar age. Everyone had moved into the neighborhood at the same time. And my current house where I live, it was built in 1962. And we bought it about 20 years ago. And as we moved in, there were still quite a few of the original owners left that started in, the 1960s. So, the neighborhood was immediately not as welcoming just because they were much older than us and they just didn't care anymore to talk to their new neighbors or, and so since then, more people have moved in, but we're all of kind of different ages our kids are all different ages, not quite so much in common. So we are friendly with our neighbors, but it's not like the old days.
Yeah, we're friendly. We've got some who are younger and some who are older and some who are, I don't know, I just don't have a lot in common with. But, I'm sure if I dropped dead snowblowing this morning, they would call an ambulance for me. They're all kind people in their own way. And like I said, I have this Facebook group now for my neighborhood, and they're always posting things on there. It's like I didn't know so much was going on. This cat's missing. This cat is found. And does anybody need some salt for their sidewalks? I've got a truckload of it for some reason. All kinds of things. And some people says, I just had an operation. Can somebody snowblow my driveway and help me out? And people are kind. I'm not outgoing. I'm too introverted to jump into things. But yeah, I do have a podcast. That's my service to society, people.
Yeah. Well, I guess electronic communication has, instead of talking over the fence.
Yeah.
Now you talk on one of these local community groups, but no, I'm not a part of that either.
So I've got some Amazon packages behind me if you're watching on video, and those are my Christmas presents, and they are largely thanks to our Patreon subscribers and supporters. So I'll be putting all your names on my Christmas tags in very small writing. You'll get credit. That's not true, of course, but it could be because we're too old to read it. But yes, thank you to our Patreon subscribers. And yeah, got some. Christmas is okay this year. It's okay. I've got it under control. I do leave things too long usually, and then it sort of sneaks up on you, and I start to see the delivery dates disappear, and I can't get it by Christmas anymore. So that's why I drove to Best Buy instead of getting it from someone closer by. So yeah, very happy. I think my family will be happy.
Yeah. So thanks to our Patreon supporters, it's going to be a Merry Christmas.
Yes, you saved Christmas, Patreon supporters. So thank you to all of you. So let's get on with the show here, talking about our favorite stories. What struck you last year?
Well, first of all, I want to give a quick update to the story we talked about just 2 days ago for us. We recorded the last episode 2 days ago, and there's already an update on this story. So I thought I would mention it because I was talking about.
There's a lot going on, so much in the last 2 days that I've created a special lightning round for this show. It'll be shorter because I didn't have time to work on it, but we will have a lightning round at this show, which is unusual. It'll be a little dated by the time you hear it, unless you're one of our paid supporters, then you'll get it early. And I don't know if you'll listen to it, paid supporters, but hopefully you do.
Well, there's always a lot going on in clean energy, which is why we have this podcast. There's lots to talk about and report on. But yeah, just 2 days ago, we recorded and we talked about California's electric bike subsidy program. In California, you can get up to $2,000 for an e-bike, and the program finally opened after many delays. And as expected, it was, fully subscribed within minutes.
Oh, dear.
They only had 1,500 of these to give away, and there was a fairly complicated online process here. So
really?
The story from Electrek, they quoted somebody here about the process for it. So this person says, I've been an avid bike rider for 30 years. I live on a fixed income. I did public and nonprofits of various sorts for my career and fit the lowest income bracket for qualification for the rebate, this reader explained. I, like many, waited a year or more for California to finally get this going. Tonight was the night. I prepared myself in advance, income verification, driver's license, watched the videos, got online an hour before the opening bell, and then was automatically put in the queue. After 45 minutes, it was over, and the application window was closed. So it's like getting Taylor Swift tickets. This is a difficult,
maybe even harder because there's only 1,500. I mean, California is the size of Canada population-wise. It's like its own country, and 1,500 is not very many. I mean, I would think they'd be snapped up in our small city that we live in pretty quickly, let alone California.
Yeah, well, if you imagine this as absolutely like the population of Canada, having only 1,500 available for the entire population of Canada would seem kind of ridiculous. Now, they do say there is more coming. There's enough money left for 2,300 more vouchers. So presumably this program will open again. But, it just made me wonder. I love reporting on stories like this because, as we know, e-bikes, it's hugely important to decarbonizing. As you like to point out, this is absolutely life-changing for somebody on a low income. To be able to get around on an e-bike is totally amazing, especially in California where, they have typically nice weather for most of the year in Southern California. But yeah, I don't know if there is a better way to do this, or you just need to put more money into it, or you make it a smaller subsidy and give out more money.
Like maybe you don't pay for the whole darn e-bike. Maybe you make them pay for $500 or something, and then you can service that many more people. And, e-bikes can vary in price. You can get one from China on Amazon. By the way, my bike is still on Amazon, the one that I bought just at the beginning of the pandemic before everyone bought up all the e-bikes. I went out and bought one on Amazon. And it was like 1,000 something. And I thought it was a pretty good deal. And now then it went way up in price for years. And now it's an NCM bike. I forget the model number, but it's a pretty decent bike, I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah. And I've had mine for at least a couple of years now. Awesome. I mean, they're always still too expensive. You really have to do search for a bargain.
But a bike like that's probably $700-800. Like, at the beginning of the pandemic also, that I noticed that the reason why I started thinking about it is because Walmart in Canada had a bike for $900, which we thought was a great deal at the time. It wasn't a great bike, of course, but the one I had is pretty well made for a bike. It's heavy. It's not as light. You pay more for a lighter bike. But yeah, I'm assuming you could get one for $600 or $700 in California, and maybe they have more people getting them if they do that.
And I'm always surprised at the price of non-electric bikes. Like you can easily here in Canada get into the thousands of dollars for,
Oh, sure.
You have to spend a bit of money just to get a decent bike these days. Like if you buy the absolute cheapest pedal bicycle, they just tend to fall apart immediately.
Oh, they do. And they're dangerous. Like I had a friend, it literally fell apart riding down the street right after buying it because, the department stores don't know how to assemble bikes, or maybe you get a good person now and again, but generally speaking, they're not good and you need to upgrade some of the parts. Like you could buy a bike from Walmart and take it to a bike shop and have them. And they said that's a lot of their business. I've heard that my bike mechanics say that's a lot of their business is getting bikes from Walmart and places like that, and Canadian Tire here in Canada, and fixing them and just, putting better parts on them. So yeah, I don't know. I bought a bike for $400. My last bike I bought was $400 prior to the e-bike. And it was a $3,200 bike that some rich guy with carpet in his garage. That's how I determined if somebody's rich, if they have carpeting in their garage. They're from the Roberts Plaza area down where you live in the good part of town. And it was a good bike. That became very proficient at that because my whole family biked, right? So, and my kids outgrew their bikes every year or two. So I was always buying used bikes and doing a really good job at getting them because they were in the mountain biking club and they all had $2,000 bikes, the rich idiot kids at the mountain biking club. And I had to compete with that. So I was out there, getting the best $100, $200 bikes that I could get and doing a really good job and then fixing them and then sometimes putting parts on them and upgrading things. And I was busy for a while there.
Well, I remember when the last place I lived in Toronto, we were in a housing co-op, but it was in a very wealthy neighborhood. And they had a garage sale day, and it was the best thing ever because it was people just getting rid of stuff. They didn't really need the money for it in the garage sale.
They just wanted to get rid of it.
Pick up amazing stuff for super cheap.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Okay, so this was one story I thought was worth talking about. The amount of money spent on clean energy in 2024 is now up to $2 trillion. So this story is from the International Energy Agency. It was $1.8 trillion in 2023. It's now up to $2 trillion in spending on clean energy in 2024. While fossil fuel spending is now about $1 trillion a year. So clean energy spending is now double that of fossil fuel spending around the world. So again, I guess another reason.
No one around here in our petro province of Canada would have any clue that. Okay, most people in the world probably don't know that. They don't listen to our show. The entire world, Brian, should listen to our show and become smarter, right? Am I wrong? No, they should be.
You are right.
People I talk to don't even. Do you talk to friends about this stuff who don't listen to our show ever? Does it ever come up and they just are clueless?
It comes up every once in a while, and I think I talked about this before. It's like everybody read something about, say, hydrogen 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's what they sort of remember.
Onto it. Hydrogen
they
is
hooked
the
onto
future.
it 10 years ago, and it's like, okay, well, when are we going to get to our hydrogen economy? And sure, there's a place for clean hydrogen in all of this, but it's always more complicated than that. And if you don't follow it every week, like we do, or by listening to the podcast, there's just way more nuance going on. And, nuclear is the other one. Again, people read something about small modular nuclear reactors 3 or 4 years ago and just assumed, oh, okay, well, that's going to be the solution to this. And well, maybe that's a part of it, but it's more complicated.
I was listening to an interesting podcast episode yesterday. I was watching it on YouTube because it's like ours, there's both versions of it. It's the Cleaning Up podcast, and it's a bit into the weeds. It's more policy stuff for policy people. But this was a year-end policy review podcast with, well, first of all, the author, the person who does the podcast is the person who started Bloomberg Clean Energy Finance. So now they have a podcast, and they were talking about people who, the guests on the show really know what they're talking about, right? They are either policy analysts or they are working in the field itself. So yeah, that hydrogen started out on that show maybe years ago thinking it gets smaller every year. You know, the use case scenario for hydrogen and where they think it's going to go. And right now it's down to maybe shipping and maybe some storage for some areas, energy storage, like a battery, like you make hydrogen and then you use the hydrogen up as a seasonal thing, which I think is maybe perfect for our climate because we have a large seasonal variation in sunlight, because in the wintertime, the days are shorter. The sun is at a less efficient angle for solar. Yeah. So we have to deal with, everyone having a heat pump like you at one day and then using electricity for heat as well as everything else. So, but our province, by the way, just said, screw I don't know if you read that, Brian, you probably read the local news, but they said, screw to the any energy goals at all. They just don't give a crap.
Yeah.
Which means nobody's going to come to our province and set up shop. You're not going to have an Amazon data center. You're not going to have a Microsoft data center. You're not going to have anybody coming here. Even the mining companies that are here have to make their own clean energy because the province won't do it. And if they have to have, accountability to what emissions they are having, and they want to reduce that, at least through their electricity use. So it's a stupid, And then, and I was telling my son about this conversation you overheard at a coffee shop yesterday. And he said, that Andrew Scheer guy, who's a politician, they're just anti-woke. They won't have anything to do with anything, not even biofuel. Biofuel to them is like woke hippie crap, It's actually not a good thing to do. We've talked about how many acres of biofuel it takes to power a car compared to how many solar panels it would take to power an electric car. And it's a fraction of the size. So biofuels are not the answer. But the refinery that choked me out of my life and limb last night because it was a storm coming in, it was the windows from the east, couldn't breathe. Had to turn off the furnace because it was sucking in air from outside that was, going to kill me and everyone else around here. And that refinery who processes heavy oil, upgrades heavy oil, is going to now concentrate on green jet fuel by 2050, they think. So, at least that's plausible that they might need to do that there might be a market, but and my son who studies in engineering says all of the chemical engineers are all about biofuels. And he says it's because they don't have anything else to talk about. He said they have nothing else that applies to them that they can really use in the transition future. So they latch on to that and hope that something, that there's a place for it, but there's not. And it's so easy to find out that there's not. You just can't be in a bubble. You have to go outside your bubble and see what's actually going on in the world and what the forecasters are saying. And analysts.
What's that saying? Like when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like it's
sure.
People are absolutely but yes, aviation fuel. Like we know that aviation is one of those things that's going to be very difficult to go electric or decarbonize. So it's a bridge perhaps with more environmentally friendly aviation fuels. But it's kind of like how again, if I do chat with friends, every once in a while, like natural gas comes up as a solution because, all of the PR around the natural gas, it's like clean natural gas. Yeah. We've been brainwashed to think of clean fuel. Natural gas.
I'm making air quotes. Podcast
but of course, it's only clean compared to coal. Like we just have to stop burning stuff. Yeah. But again, if you're not fully paying attention, it might be like, oh, we have natural gas instead of coal. Well, I guess that's pretty good.
Sure, 20 years ago, sure, but
20 years ago, or if it was somehow necessary.
That freaking gas plant that was announced at the beginning of our podcast just opened an hour down the highway. So,
back in 2021 on the show, we talked about a local natural gas power plant. It took them this long to open it. So that's the first problem. Like, it's not like it's easy to build a natural gas power
And
plant.
the thing is going to be defunct in 12 years, 11 years.
There's laws. It's going to be outlawed by 2035, but they think they can keep it running to 2050.
Yeah. Screw them. They're idiots and environmental terrorists, just like our friend Jay. I just had to say that again because it was funny. Oh, by the way, before my daughter left late for school this morning after I shoveled her out of the driveway, she said, "I've got a story for you. There's rumors on the internet that raccoons are treating cyber trucks like garbage cans and they're trying to get in." So she actually tried to verify it. I'll give her credit. She said there was only one news organization that covered it and they didn't have the actual story. They were only repeating the story. So good for her. But keep an eye out for raccoons treating Cybertrucks as tin can garbage cans that may or may not have food in it. You certainly can't leave food in your Cybertruck if you hit McDonald's and stuff a wrapper under your seat like I used to do when I was a kid. All right, I'm going to get to some other stories here that got to me. And one of the big ones was the former Tesla employee or head. He was an executive with the company. He started his own recycling company. Or did he co-found Tesla? He co-founded Tesla, and he's still on the board.
Straubel, J.B. Straubel?
Yeah. He started Redwood Materials, and they started, they've been in the works for a long time, but now they've got actual stuff happening. And what they do is they crush the batteries, and they use the energy from the crushed batteries at that first stage, which is amazing. They don't, you would think it would take a lot of energy to recycle batteries and break down the minerals. Where they're using a lot of the energy right from the battery, because the used batteries will have some energy in them. So there's a chemical process that starts to happen when you crush them, and it heats up themselves. So most of the heat is coming from themselves, which I thought was fantastic because, battery recycling isn't a huge issue now, like many people say it is. Many people think, 1,000-pound batteries from EVs are going to the dump. They're not. They're not going to the landfill. They are valuable for second use and then recycling. So yeah, and the 95% efficiency is what they think. So 95% of those critical minerals in a battery from an EV will go into a better battery. That's what blew my mind this year, maybe the most out of anything. And also, it's a very important story. We talk about a circular economy where you're reusing things like steel is melted down to the new steel, and you don't make much new steel anymore at some point because the population doesn't expand constantly. And yeah, so this is a fantastic way of getting 95% of those minerals out, but it's better than 95% because the chemistry tweaks in batteries are getting better and better every year incrementally, but there's been some huge steps in the last 18 months, and they will go into a battery that's more than 100% of the power that it came from. So in a sense that it's more than 95% efficiency, which is great because we don't have to worry about that. So at some point you're mining for maybe a few small percentage of those minerals as opposed to the whole thing when you're replacing those batteries at whatever level, say 20 years for the power grid, 10 years now, but maybe 20 years in the future generations of batteries and 20 years for cars. So yeah, it's fantastic and exciting news that is happening. And the Chinese companies are also doing it. And I think one said 97 or 98% efficient. So yeah, they are getting all the minerals out of those batteries, and then you don't have to mine them. And if you can use low energy to do it, then you're not creating a lot of emissions either. You're creating some emissions, but it's not like going and mining and building a whole new, battery and refining.
Yeah, the key thing is there that it's going to be easier to get the minerals from the batteries than it's going to be to mine them. So the path of least resistance, that's what's going to happen, is very, very strong battery recycling. All right, one of my favorite stories from the year that we talked about, Britain has kicked the coal habit. Britain, very famous for their coal power generation. That's what they had. And, this fueled the Industrial Revolution. But all good things must come to an end. Bad things must also come to an end.
Yes, coal must come to an end.
But these statistics are just staggering. As recently as 1990, coal supplied 80% of Britain's electricity. 1990. they had 80% coming from coal. And then they got it down to 1% this past year, and then finally shut down their last coal power plant, which is just an amazing good news story.
Yeah. And you know what? We were 50% coal in that area for our province in Canada here, Saskatchewan, and they've done nothing.
Yeah.
You know, they could have done something in that time. We have tremendous wind and solar resources. They could have done the same thing. They did not. It shows that what you can do. Like, I mean, can you imagine 80% coal? What are we going to do? We're 80% coal. Well, they've got it down to 1, and then it's going to go away completely. It is possible. And it's not like, you know, the United Kingdom is like the leader in the world when it comes to stuff, but they're doing, you know, pretty good job compared to a lot of places, certainly like us.
And they're famous for not a lot of sunshine, and that they have tons of solar in their power grid.
The big thing about solar is that there's a pathway to 36% or more efficiency by layering solar panels, different kinds of solar things, like one that takes advantage of different light waves. Like you put 3 of them together, and then it's a bifacial as well, picking up the reflection from below the solar panel as well on the two-sided. They now see a pathway to 36%, and the theoretical peak efficiency for solar was around, I think, 28, 29% or something like that. And we were only around 22, 23, maybe in a lab, 26%. Well, now they think that they can get to 36%. And there's a lot of confidence that this will be the future. I don't know when, probably the next decade, some point, you know, I don't know, early, mid, or late, probably mid or late, that this could happen by 2040 to be 36% efficient solar panels. So that would be almost twice of what our panels are on our roof right now that we had installed like 5 years ago or something like that. So the same area, you know, there are parts of the world that are hard to make renewable energy for. There's, you know, city-states like Singapore and other places where the only place to put solar is on roofs. Well, if you can have twice the power from those roof space that you have, then you don't have to worry about agriculture. You don't have to worry about where you're going to put your solar farms and NIMBYism or anything like that. You can make it so people want to put solar on their roofs. And and speaking of which, Pakistan solar came out of nowhere because they've had so many power cuts in Pakistan, and because the price of power skyrocketed because of the problems that they had. Everyone this year started buying solar for their business, for their homes. And I don't know how officially, like it may not be done the same way we do it, where we get building permits done and electricians coming. A lot of this might be just, you know, a friend who's electrician minded might have come over and done the install and things like that. But it's a huge solar surge that has reached new heights in Pakistan, sparking what some experts are calling one of the fastest solar revolutions in the world ever. Thanks to cheap Chinese solar technology imports, Pakistan is expected to add an estimated 17 gigawatts of solar power in 2024. And get this, it's more than a third of the country's entire generating capacity. A third in 1 year by people. This is people, not the government, making massive solar farms. Maybe a little bit, but mostly it's people and business owners going out and buying cheap Chinese solar and just saying, screw you, the grid, I'm not going to pay this money. I'm going to, you know, make it cheaper for me. And that's the economics that we talk about in our optimism, that it's basically an unstoppable force. So thanks to that happening, that is a third of their power just in 1 year. Countrywide, consumers, businesses, and industries too, I didn't mention industries, because if you've got a factory, you know, and you're paying a lot for electricity, your bottom line is horribly affected. So maybe you put as much solar as you possibly can on your property, and they are rushing to tap into cheap renewable power sources, an alternative to the erratic and expensive state-provided, largely fossil fuel-based energy. And there's a story from DW.com linked in your show notes.
Yeah, I absolutely love that story about balcony solar in Germany, because I think, you know, the first time I saw the headline, I sort of thought, oh, that's a cute story. It's like, you know, a little hobby that some people have. No, it's not a hobby. It's huge. It's a massive, massive thing.
Yes, it is. Like everybody's doing it. If you're not doing it, you're a fool, because it doesn't take that much money. We're talking hundreds of dollars here to offset, energy bills. And yeah, it's working very well. And it's not feeding into the grid so much. It's just using your own power, your routers, your lights, your TV, your computer, whatever you're using. It's not going to power your oven, but it'll, offset that power a little bit.
And it pays for itself. But I just want to make a point about air conditioning penetration. In my own house, I did not have air conditioning.
You, Brian Stockton.
It was
co-host of this show.
I think.
We didn't have to go far to find one.
It just never seemed necessary. We have some hot days here. We always complain about the cold ones, but, we bought this house 20 years ago. There's a few hot days every summer. It didn't seem like we needed the air conditioning. But as we often talk about, the forest fire smoke in the summer is kind of the last straw. We not only have more hot days, but you want to keep the windows closed, unfortunately.
And one more thing I'll mention in this segment is that batteries are really going down in price. And yeah, the cost of batteries in China now is like $50 per kilowatt hour. This is not battery pack prices, but that is also below the threshold where it can beat, combustion engines. But these sodium batteries, which we talked about, which are coming out now in the last 18 months, and they're actually going into products. They're actually going into cars. This is not a laboratory press release that we often get. And by the way, the amount of press releases we're getting is really taken off. I think we must be higher up on the charts or something because we're getting so much contact from people. And occasionally there's something interesting that comes along, but we don't do interviews. And they pretend to listen to the show, but, if they are, we don't do interviews. But sodium prices are going to be half that. Sodium ion batteries, with sodium replaces lithium. And there's some advantages to that. They work better in cold weather. They last longer. And there are some challenges as well because they don't have as much energy density. But for a lot of cars, they can work, and charge fairly quick and half the price. So when that happens, if you're talking about grid storage, which is what we need to make renewables, which are variable work, solar and wind are variable, the more batteries we have, that is going to be a big thing. And they're installing batteries in grids as fast as they can right now. And it's still going to come down quite a bit in the next 5 years. It's going to come down a lot.
Yeah, and another thing that surprised me this year was alkaline batteries, like normal disposable alkaline batteries that you would buy, AA's, AAA's. Those are starting to be now supplanted by lithium versions.
Really?
Not rechargeable ones, lithium-based disposable batteries.
Just you go buy a battery for your flashlight, and it's a lithium battery because it's so cheap.
They're outlasting the alkaline ones now.
That's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about lithium, you think about how cars don't work in cold weather. Well, lithium is, if you've got like a sensor on it. I used to have a sensor for something. I had like pre-smart stuff, pre-Ring doorbells. I had some sort of sensor on my tree that had batteries in it. It was the best thing to buy for it was like a lithium thing. So it would, I forget what I had it do. I think it turned on lights or something when somebody walked in. But anyway, batteries outdoors work really well with their lithium. I still got this thing from Costco, these patio lights that work on 2 lithium AA batteries that I've had for years. And it could be 40 below out, and those things come on at night if it's a sunny day, and they will come on as they do all the time. And I think, wow, that's just amazing. They keep working. But yeah, batteries getting cheaper, and they, like solar, are going to change the world. And they are the next step here after solar coming down so much in price and still going down. Batteries are the next thing, and that's going to really rock the energy world.
All right. So another favorite topic here on the show are lawsuits against governments, cities, counties, states, countries. Young people are often suing because they see their future in jeopardy from climate change and they see governments not doing enough about it. Well, this is actually a fresh update to a story that actually dates back to 2023, but here's the update from Electrek. The historic Montana youth climate lawsuit has now been upheld by the state Supreme Court. So when they won the first round, this was a very big deal. They said that the young people do have a right to complain about this stuff, but the fact that it was now affirmed by the state Supreme Court, this is a very big deal for climate-related activism in lawsuits.
Yeah, the Montana Constitution said everyone has a right to clean and healthy, breathable air. And they challenged that. And the lawmakers said, bah, humbug, it's going to be overturned. And just yesterday, it was upheld in the Supreme Court. And that is a huge thing because this affects other climate lawsuits. Once you have a win, other things can start happening. And that's one of the trends that I think is happening and continuing to pick up in 2024 is climate lawsuits. And people, if you're vulnerable to a lawsuit, then you have to start behaving. Even if you're not sued, that affects the whole shape of things, right? People have to start, getting their act together.
Yeah, other states, this is a warning to other states, get your act together or the kids are going to sue you.
Yeah. There's a lawsuit here in our jurisdiction too, so that's progressing slowly, but it will progress, and we'll keep you up to date on that. Another big story from last year is sort of the Tesla NACS revolution. That is the charging port and sort of format for electric vehicles. All the electric vehicle companies have pretty much now decided to convert to that. And I think Hyundai has a car that's coming out now that they showed that'll be available within weeks or a month that will actually have that NACS connector. And it's a lot better. It's now not Tesla's connector anymore, but you can use it on a Tesla supercharger.
Yeah, this is the end of the beta versus VHS war, if you will, although that reference now is awfully old. People probably don't even know what I'm talking about. But over in Europe, they decided to standardize on CCS. That decision was made a few years ago. Yes, the Tesla NACS connector is way better. It's way smaller. It's more elegant. So, I think it's great that North America decided to go with that. But the main thing is that as long as there's a standard that everybody can use, so now there's one for Europe, there's one for North America. That's great.
And also the plug and charge agreement, which we just talked about a week or two ago, makes it like Tesla owners have and like I have with one brand of charger. And I think other people have with one or two brands of chargers. Now it's going to be everywhere where there's a protocol where the charger talks to the car talks to the charger. They've agreed on one thing, one way of doing it so that all cars will work with all chargers. And then all you have to do is set up an account and have your credit card on the account and you just plug it in. So you're on a vacation, you got to go pee, you stop, your bladder's full, you plug it in and you walk away. And the car will talk to each other and it'll say, okay, this is this car and we'll charge it appropriately. And you don't have to do anything. Because people have to fiddle with 20 different apps, for each brand.
Yeah.
My phone's full of them, and it's just, and then sometimes you put a card up, sometimes it needs a credit card because something doesn't work. This makes the whole thing easier, and that makes EV adoption easier.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that is not even possible on a gasoline car or at the gasoline network, or if it is possible, they're not going to bother to do it because, of course, that technology is on the way out. So, yeah, just imagine a future where everybody just plugs in and walks away. You absolutely cannot do that with filling up a gas car.
Even if it takes longer, it's easier, right? Because you have to sit there. I hate the part about pumping gas. The worst is like, because I used to go to the Shell near me and it was cold out and the screen moved so slow. Do you want a car wash? And it would fade in slowly. Yes or no. Are you sure? No. And then, do you have any points? No. So it was just a frustrating process where I wanted to, take out my gun and shoot it. And of course, we don't have guns in Canada, which is a good thing. Or I would have shot it by now.
Yeah.
Certainly would have shot it.
No, I told a story on the podcast from a couple of years ago when we went to Jasper around, Christmas time a couple of years ago. Frigid cold. And we had rented a gas car to get us from Edmonton to Jasper. And it was a really nice Hyundai. I really enjoyed the car. But then we had to fill it up before we left Jasper. And it was -30 with like a -40 wind chill. And I was like, oh, wait, I have to stand here with the pump and fill it up. Whereas if it was an electric charge, I could just charge it and get back in the warm car.
Barbarianism.
All right, time to move on to my favorite year-end segment, which is favorite out-of-context audio clip from the last year.
I remember the clip. I don't remember the context.
No, I don't either, but it's not important.
You don't.
I just looked
What's
through the list
then?
of audio clips that we'd used for the year, and that one was the most fun. And we should use that every week. Like, such a great clip.
Why? What is it? What is it? Now we have to have some listener with a photographic memory tell us what that was from, because I can't remember why we used that.
No, but of course it's from the movie There Will Be Blood.
Drink it up!
Yeah, we like to throw in audio clips occasionally.
Okay, well, here's something that I learned last year that I didn't think about, and that is the electrification of planes. When a jet takes off, say a passenger jet that you might take on vacation or something, or a business trip, when it lands, it's a lot lighter than when it took off. And it's meant that way. In fact, that's why you hear about jets flying around and burning off fuel, like not burning off fuel, but actually ejecting the fuel and having it evaporate into the air so they can land so that their weight goes down. If they have a technical problem, and I'm a bit of an aviation nerd, as I've said before, so when you take off and you have a problem with your jet and you have to land right away, sometimes they can't land right away. They have to actually burn off fuel, and they have to put out a notice not to fly, under that jet that's ejecting all of its fuel. But electric planes will be the same weight when they land as when they take off. So that's yet another challenge to electrifying aviation, is that, jets get lighter as they fly, but not with batteries, because electrons spent are not weight. China has become even more predominant. That's something that's happened this year, and I think something's going to happen next year. They are on their way to have companies like BYD become the largest manufacturer of cars in the world. They've now overtaken, I think they're like number 3 now or something in the world as far as cars. And they're not all EVs, by the way. So a lot of them are now hybrid, plug-in hybrids, but they also make gas cars as well, but not as many. So yeah, Imagine Dairy, this is now food tech. This is Imagine Dairy last year. It's a company out of Israel, and they are making fermented milk, basically fake milk, but identical, but fake, using a type of process called precision fermentation, which a lot of people call it now, in a brewery-like vats. And they've now got their prices down. He said last year that their dairy prototype formulation is already at price parity with traditional dairy products. So that is something that is going to come after dairy agriculture in a big way. It's going to start with business to business, where you take your protein powders or dairy powders and you sell it to another company who puts it into a chocolate bar or a protein shake or a cereal or whatever you're using the dairy product for. It's going to start there, and eventually it's going to make its way to just, milk. And it's not going to be even GMO. It's going to be mostly identical, molecularly identical to milk. So, and then you just add fats and water at will. And yeah, the protein part is the important part, and that's what is at price parity. So that is going to be a big disruption that is going to start happening. It started happening this year because price parity was reached with one company, and that's just going to spread. Now, you may not notice it. Have you noticed high filtered milk in stores now? Like, what do they call it?
I think I've seen that, yeah.
Because we've noticed on some of the dairy products we buy, the expiry date has greatly extended. It's like 2 weeks instead of 1 week, or 3 weeks instead of a week and a half. And the expiry dates are really weird because sometimes they call themselves, what's it called? Filtered? Is it fine?
Or microfiltered or something?
Microfiltered dairy or something like that. You're right. I think it is like that. Anyway, yeah, dairy's changing. And, dairy, we talked about this a lot. Agriculture requires a lot of emissions that go into the world. And dairy and beef is a big one. So not good we used to have a dairy farmer listening to the show, but it's not good for them. Maybe their futures, but yeah, I think that's going to make a big difference to emissions. And it's going to be, again, economics, because once you hit price parity, you start to go below the price. Once you get more efficiencies and larger scales of production, then you start to go below of what it takes to, make a liter of milk, a gallon of milk. It's a lot of water. It's a lot of energy goes into that. That doesn't necessarily have to with technology now.
Yeah, well, it's like once it gets cheaper to retrieve the minerals from spent batteries, you don't have to mine. It's the same kind of thing. Like once it's cheaper, we don't have to bug the cows to give us a bunch of milk for something that is identical on a molecular level. All right, one of the great stories from this year was Paris. We had the Paris Olympics, and what was really interesting to me was that Paris really went all out to really green the city, partly for the Olympics, but just partly because it makes Paris a better city. Paris now has more than 1,300 kilometers of bicycle lanes, 500 of which were rolled out between 2014 and 2020. 30 kilometers worth of new lanes have been added both in and outside the city center for the Olympics. So they really tried to make the Olympics bicycle friendly. Paris has always been a traditionally pretty car-centric city, but they've been doing lots in the last few years, including like higher costs for large SUVs. They've been doing things like big picnics and car-free days as well. And I think we can all agree that, cities get more pleasant once the streets aren't just completely jammed up with cars.
Absolutely. And, there was Tom Cruise.
Of course, yes. Tom Cruise then, went down on a zip line in the stadium and then rode an electric motorcycle carrying the flame.
Made by a company that my good friend is the brother-in-law to the CEO. So that is pretty close to home, even though it's a California-based company and we're in Canada.
Amazing.
So, small world. So let's get on with the lightning round then. A special bonus year-end God help us lightning round after this. Time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Joe Biden, friend of the show, on his way out, Brian. I don't know if he'll shuffle out or he'll be carted out, but he's done. Did more for the climate than any other U.S. president. Possibly the last president elected in U.S. history of any decency, has pledged to cut greenhouse gases. This is hot off the press by 60% by 2035. So better than Canada. We've got this, Canadian prime minister that everybody thinks is a granola chugging hippie. Not true. Joe Biden is the guy. Him and the people who advise him and are in his cabinet are doing big things. So we'll see what happens with that now that another guy is getting in office. Rivian and the United Auto Workers Union have come to an agreement. The agreement is reached that is confidential, apparently, requiring the company to be neutral towards union organizing, which is a different take than what Tesla has gone. So Rivian is the maker, sort of a pickup truck and SUV. They are a startup. They are new to the world, but making a great premium adventure vehicle. And they're going to get $6.6 billion in conditional federal loan to start making their plant down south in the United States. There's that huge Montana Supreme Court win, which just happened. And why don't we get to a CES fast fact? Oh, it took 30 years for Poland's share of electricity from coal to go from 96%. We were talking about England, United Kingdom, at 80% in 1990. Well, this is even bigger, Brian. Poland was at 96%. I don't know what the other 4% was. Maybe it was hope. But in 1990, 96% was coming from coal, and it was just 68% in 2020. But Poland will get to zero coal by just 2032. And its second largest utility just announced it is exiting coal by 2030. So, again, I don't understand why jurisdictions like ours can't do what large other parts of the world are doing.
It's not super quick, but they had 96%
entirely.
Coal power
You'd think,
in 1990.
What are we going to do? We have to have coal. No,
is
we
a
don't.
Difficult problem to solve, but they are actually doing it.
Now, if you look at a map of North America, a map of Canada, you'll see that big bay up there. That is Hudson Bay, fairly far north, but it dips quite a bit south. It is going to be around 20 degrees Celsius warmer this year at Christmas time, according to the forecast, than the 1979 to 2000 average. 20 degrees warmer. And you know how you go more north is the more extreme that the temperature rises in a warming world. So it affects the north even more. This is from Asia.Nikkei, the Nissan and Honda. We talked about Nissan being in trouble. Well, they're going to basically form a partnership structure with Honda. They're going to merge in a way. I don't know if I assume the Nissan brand will continue, but I'm just going to tell everyone now that I drive a Honda Leaf, if you'll accept that, Brian.
Well, the very first car that I bought was a Nissan, but it was also a Datsun. It was a Datsun/Nissan because that used to be the name of the company. And I bought it in the transition year. It was a 1983 model. So it actually had both names on it, Datsun and Nissan.
Really? That's cool. You must have pictures of that. You blew it up, didn't you, eventually? You blew up that car for a film?
No, that
was a different car?
That was a different car that I blew up, yeah,
okay.
For a film.
So many cars you blew up. Yeah, so there's these new kinds of offshore wind turbines, which are like two turbines kind of on a V-shaped structure that float. This is floating. Yeah. There's places in the world where you can't anchor wind turbines into the ocean floor because there's not a high shelf like there is on the east coast of North America. On the west coast, not so much. So a lot of places in the world need to have floating offshore wind in order to make offshore wind. Well, these new V-shaped there's two wind turbines, two sets of blades on one thing that floats in a V-shape, and it is 16.6 megawatts, which is pretty significant for one thing. So, the more you can have in a wind turbine offshore, the less money it takes because you have to go out there and install it and maintain it. So yeah, that's quite big. And they are now in action. We've mentioned them before in the show. It is from Mingyang Smart Energy. And there's a story on electric and a link there. And that is it for this week and this year. And what a year it's been. It's suddenly come to an end, Brian.
And rapidly approaching the 5-year mark of this 10-year podcast.
All right. Well, contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And thanks again to our Patreon members who have helped us out. You get ad-free episodes, exclusive access to a Discord server of ours, discounts at our merch store, which I'll have to renew after the new year, early access to our episodes before the public gets them, and behind-the-scenes material and private updates. And sometimes with long shows like this, you get a longer show than you otherwise would, of more deluxe director's cut of the show, and thank you credits on our audio podcast and video podcast and shout-outs as well. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again in the new year.
Yeah, see you next year.